Welcome to the Dating Debrief podcast, where we have created a space to get into the nitty-gritty of dating and glorifying God. And what does that mean in 2024? My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team here at Cornerstone, and I've been married for almost 7 years to Cameron. And on the couch today, we have...
My name is Laura, and I am the Associate Director for Guest Services here at Cornerstone. I'm also the coffee house manager, and I am single. Woo-hoo.
My name is Joel. I get to serve as the young adults pastor at Cornerstone, married to an incredible woman named Emily. We're going on 4 years this year.
That's awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Let's get started. Chris Hilkin was in the house this weekend.
He's
so fun. What were some takeaways, some things that stuck out to you guys from his message?
Yeah, so much. I would say the biggest thing that I took away was letting God be the bouncer of your heart.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
I never heard that before like that. And even when I was listening to the message in service, he was like, who is the bouncer of your heart? And somebody over here was like, Jesus. And it was like, true, always. True, actually. Amen. But yeah. Awesome. So what did you feel like that kind of meant for you, or can you elaborate a little bit more why that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, it is seeking Jesus in every relationship that I pursue, really seeking him in prayer and seeking his will and seeking what he wants for me, because I know that he wants the best for me. And so that means not settling or not going just on casual dates with somebody.
Yeah.
And really asking God, okay, God, is this the right person that I should go on a date with? Yeah. So yeah.
That's so good. I think that's even just a win, with the culture of dating, to even be asking that of God, is this a person I should be going out with? That's huge. Yeah. Because oftentimes just with dating apps, it's just an instant, you don't even need to evaluate. Right. You can just instantly connect with somebody and then pursue that. So to pause and assess and to invite the Lord into it, that is huge. Yeah. Yeah. Something so powerful, kind of playing off of that, was this idea that Chris talked about was there's a difference between pursuing happiness and holiness. Can you help us recap what is that difference? And, how do we see that in dating?
Yeah, I think the world, our culture, the air we breathe will constantly tell us happiness is the goal of your dating relationship and ultimately the marriage relationship if you head in that direction. The Bible would teach us that holiness, pursuing God, becoming more like Jesus is the goal of our Christian life, and that should ultimately be the goal of our relationships. Yeah. I think what the problem is that we think that by ignoring the temporal happiness that the world offers, which ultimately is going to fall short and leave us unsatisfied anyways. Yeah. But we buy into the lie that that is the thing that will bring us happiness, and God asking us to abstain or not engage in those types of behaviors or not date that way is him ripping us off. Yeah. And so there's this false dynamic where we think that he is not a John 10:10 God, and we need to trust that he is a God who says, I came to give you life and life abundant. Life is full and overflowing and joyful and peaceful and lacking no satisfaction. It's just the definition of, do we want that? Do we believe that he's that good? Or are we just no, I want what I want now. Yeah. This thing that promises me happiness right now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good. I had a friend too in the trenches of dating who would say to herself too, God will not rip me off. God will not rip me off. And that was such a powerful way for her to just recenter, that faith muscle, in the context of dating too.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah. I think what I would say about happiness versus holiness is happiness is feelings based. And just in the season that I'm in right now in dating, it's not going to be happy all the time. There are going to be hard conversations, and it's how can we glorify God in these hard conversations of getting to know each other? Because this happy feeling is not going to last forever, even in dating and in marriage. Like, but we can remain holy and like seek God together to glorify him. And I think at the end of the day, that's like what pleases him and what he delights in too.
Yeah. That's so helpful, because even if we think that happiness is the goal, then as soon as there's a moment that doesn't look like happiness, whether we're dating a person, married to a person, then my gut instinct is going to be, I got to run and go find the happiness that I think I need somewhere else. And that's the opposite of what God calls us to in marriage, especially. So we don't want to practice for that in our dating relationships by evaluating and making decisions through the lens of, does this make me happy?
Right.
So that's really good.
Yeah,
really good. So last week, week 1, Lynn had the word healthy. And this week, we had the acronym FLOWER.
Yeah.
So just to recap people, if they haven't watched the message yet, what was the FLOWER acronym for? Like, what was that tool being used for?
As a standard to, I don't want to say measure somebody up to meet all of these things, but what you're really looking for and what you should be praying for in your person.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like assessing, evaluating. That's great. I'll go through the FLOWER really quick. So F was fully surrendered to Jesus.
Yeah.
L was loving community for believers. O was open to growth and humility. W was wisdom and guidance from mentors. E was entirely submissive to scripture. And R is relentlessly committed to protection.
Yeah.
Woo! Thank God for Chris.
And I love that acronym because it's really helpful. I think in our Christian world of dating, it's like, you know, he has to be tall and have blue eyes and he's a Christian. It's like these non-negotiable checklists that we build out. But this is a more like, I don't know, like this one is really good. Like this one really taps into like that surface level.
Yeah.
You know, of not just like, oh, I want this and I think I need this. Like, no, this is what God wants for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it plays into the idea of that metaphor of like Jesus is the bouncer of our hearts too. Yeah. Super good. Okay, so something Chris said was about yielding to Jesus being that bouncer. What are some practical ways we can yield to Jesus and invite him in that sense of kind of being the person who permits someone pass the red rope into our hearts and stuff?
Yeah. I think Pastor Chris did such a good job on hitting on the seriousness of what Proverbs talks about, where it says, above all else, guard your heart. Like more than you guard your house, more than you guard your iPhone, more than you guard your money, more than above all else, guard your heart. And then it says, because the outflow of your life comes from what's in your heart. And so I think what's helpful, a practical thought, is what makes its way into our minds is eventually going to make its way into our hearts. And so if we want the output to be something that honors God and leads to a God-honoring relationship, then we need the inputs to be something that honors God. So a pastor that I respect a lot always asks people who are like, man, I just keep going back to the bad guys in these dating relationships. And the question that's not super intuitive that he asks is like, well, what music are you listening to? And it's like, oftentimes we don't see that connection. It's like, I'm not talking about music, I'm talking about dating. It's like, well, the things that are inputs into your mind, what you're listening to, what you're watching, the people that are speaking into your life, that's going to make its way into your mind, make its way into your heart, and ultimately that's going to be the output of your life. So if we want God to be the bouncer of our lives, then we have to have things that honor him be what make their way into our minds and into our hearts.
Yeah.
That's so good. I think even too, like, adding to that of like, who is giving you advice? Like when you're seeking counsel about dating, like, does this person have a proven track record of honoring God in dating, or do they have a marriage that glorifies God and that you would want to have too? Like that was a big game changer for me when I was single, was shifting from maybe peers to older mentors, and like maybe just even like a big sister at church and stuff who had a really nice marriage, and one that I was like, that is what I think it should be, you know, and stuff.
And it's so easy for us to look for the answers we want in those moments too, like confirmation bias. Like if I want if I want to believe that this girl I'm dating or this guy I'm dating is good for me, I'll find a way to get an answer that says they're good for me.
Right.
But we got to trust. He talked about we can trust the wounds of a friend, and I think that's so powerful too, is having people who are willing to tell us the truth when it's hard for them to tell us the truth.
Yeah.
I think that matters a lot.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
And kind of transition our next question, that R of the relentlessly committed to protection. He said, most people you date, they are going to end up being someone else's spouse. So dating with the idea of not just physical protection, sexual protection, but the sense of like emotional, spiritual, relational. Like, I'm sure we've all seen stories and friends blow up different areas of their life by not being on guard.
Yeah.
So what are some like tips, advice to date in a way to protect the future marriages that may be around the dating circle that you're in?
Yeah, I would say one, isolation is dangerous. So when you are dating, don't isolate yourselves, because that's where the enemy will attack.
Yeah.
But date in community and have people that will hold you accountable. Share your boundaries up front, physical boundaries, emotional, spiritual boundaries as well. And also just really being careful with your words.
Yeah.
Like just not throwing words around like, I care about you and you're special and you mean the world to me. It's like, you can't say that too early on.
Yeah.
You really need to be careful with your words, because that will affect their heart. And yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
That's so good.
I want to tag on to that, because the thought that came to mind for me was communication
Yeah.
and clarity in communication. We know that clarity is kindness to people. And I think so often the pain that happens in relationships is that there are missed expectations. And so I'm thinking this is going great, we're going to get married someday. This person thinks like, I'm not so sure. And so then when it doesn't line up, then all of a sudden I'm hurt. And now my future spouse is going to be the one who carries that burden to help me through that wound that happened.
Yeah.
So if we can just be clear, like, hey, I don't want to get married like tomorrow, but I see this going in that direction. Like, just be really clear and candid with where you are. I think helps remove the confusion and ultimately remove some of the pain that can be caused. And we can protect people who are probably going to be someone else's spouse someday. So.
And I think just another perspective on that is how you date will lead to a conversation one day, God willing, with your spouse, where you have to share, you know, and just in all health, sharing like how far you went in these different areas.
Right.
You know, I remember even with my husband having to just share of like spiritual boundaries of like going to this guy for prayer when I was single and I thought he was cute and stuff. And so like having that in mind, like I want to have, and God he has so much grace for our testimonies and, you know, is a kind God who is quick to forgive, but at the same time living a life with a heart posture of I want that talk to be as short as possible, you know?
Yeah.
And even choosing today that moving forward, like my talk with my future spouse is going to be as short as possible, because that's even living a life of faith.
Yeah.
You know, of just I'm going to have the behavior that shows that I know I am going to like meet somebody one day and I want to stand before them with as much honor, you know, that I can and stuff. Before we move on, like let's get in the nitty gritty of like, okay, we are pursuing, protecting as much as we can in dating.
Yeah.
How do we do that? Like, what are specific boundaries? What are specific prayers that we should be praying on this subject of protection?
Yeah, for me, I would say a specific prayer that I've been praying is just like seeking God's will in it. My prayer every morning is like, God, if this is what you want for me, awesome. Show me, show up in some way today. Give me a little God whisper, God wink. Like, let me know that this is what you want for me. And if it's not, then take it out of my life. Yeah. And when I've prayed that, he has taken it out of my life so quickly that I'm like, okay, God, like he hears us and he cares about us so much that he will remove what is not best for us. And so that is one of my prayers is like, okay, God, I'm going to seek your will in this, and trust that even if it's not good for me, I know that you're still good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. So what are some specific boundaries to kind of, aid people in this subject?
Oh, man.
That moment. Oh, man.
I think
boy.
We talked about this earlier, but Song of Songs talks about don't arouse or awaken love before it's time.
Yeah.
And I think there's like the physical direction you could go there, but I think there's also the emotional direction you could go. Like Laura was saying, like you need to be very clear with what you are and are not saying to a person. Have hard lines of how much of your heart you're willing to share. So if you don't intend to go towards marriage, don't say that you think you could have yourself marry this person. Like, even if it makes them feel good in the moment and brings them temporary happiness, that's not true.
Yeah.
So be very clear with what you do and don't think, do and don't feel. Because all we're doing is bringing up emotions and feelings that are meant to neurologically like bond us to a person.
Yeah.
And then if we have to pull that apart, that's actually apart from God's design. Like, the more we have to do that, our body, Pastor Chris talked about like the pain that's caused in our body thinking, wait, I thought we were with this person and now I'm dating over here.
Yeah.
And I think that's eventually going to cause a lot of problems for us.
Yeah, that's good.
I think even in my, how my husband and I dated, we were really hesitant to start like labeling ourselves as like we're dating, we're boyfriend and girlfriend. We really pursued friendship first.
Yeah.
And when you're pursuing friendship versus, romantic relationship, the way you go about it is very different. Like in pursuing friendship, we hung out with other people. Like by the time we actually like started dating, he was already one of my best friends. Like we had already connected in a way of just doing life together, being around other people. And just each time we hung out in a group, we just kind of slowly started gravitating to just each other more and stuff. But that helped so much to where, we knew each other really well by the time we were actually dating. But something in conversations we've had before, Laura, is like, you've said like having your boundaries already established before you meet that person or start dating and stuff. And that is really pivotal to have those locked in before somebody can come in and they're like just kind of like, I'm infatuated with you, bye.
But I think what we do, Pastor Chris talked about how the Bible doesn't recognize dating. Like that is not a category that the Bible talks about. And so in biblical terms, if we're dating in a way that honors God, we are either brother and sister in Christ or husband and wife. But then we create this interim category that says, well, no, we're dating now, and it's a status that we try to sit in. And what the danger of that is we bring in privileges and responsibilities into that status that should not exist if you're not husband and wife. So like, the expectation that, hey, when he gets off work, he's going to text me. And if he doesn't, we're in a fight. And then he might be like, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Like, I didn't know where we were. So I think we move boundaries by creating this new category that can be really dangerous for us because it's not biblically recognized.
Yeah, something else that Pastor Chris said was date as slowly as you can, but get there as quickly as you can. So like, what does that mean in practical boundaries or in praying for that person? Like, what does that mean?
Date as slowly as you can, get there as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
When I hear that in this moment, I'm thinking we need to go slow and, like you said, not isolate, because isolation creates infatuation, and infatuation fights evaluation. So if we want to be people who are evaluating, we need to do that in community and go slow. Like, look for fruit over the long run, because people can say they follow Jesus, people can say they serve, they can say a lot of things. Are we seeing that in their life over a long period of time? So go slow enough to evaluate, but quick enough that, man, we're not messing around and doing all this coupling and uncoupling that we're not designed to do, is what comes to mind for me.
That's good.
We
had some awesome questions from Instagram. Thank you for sending them in. And so let's kind of like little speed round, kind of knock some of these out kind of quickly. How How do I spend time with someone without dating them, but I just want to get to know them?
At church and community.
There it is.
Boom.
Boom.
Nailed it.
Any advice for glorifying God on dating apps?
I think the temptation on dating apps is to date on dating apps like the world dates on dating apps, and then slap my Christian bumper sticker onto it.
Yeah, that's so good.
So the pictures we post, the conversations we have, and just hoping that I come across as a believer and that the person I'm interested in is a believer, like they say they are in their bio or whatever. Like I think just don't try to do it 90% like the world and tag on your Christianity. Like actually ask questions that are evaluating the FLOWER acronym or things like that.
Yeah.
So.
And we are to be set apart, and that means everywhere. That's not conditional. Just because the Bible didn't talk about dating doesn't mean we don't do that here.
Totally.
Yeah. Show Jesus everywhere in all your choices.
Yes.
Okay. How do I assess what fruit someone is producing on a dating app? Is that possible, or is it really only done in person?
I would say evaluating fruit takes time. It takes time to see if it's ripened fruit or rotten fruit.
They'll preach.
Yeah. And so, that definitely takes time. I don't think that you can see that based on a profile. I think it is seen in person, and how they interact with people and how they love on people. And
Yeah. I totally agree. I think anyone can put their Christian in their bio, their favorite Instagram Bible verse that they can throw in there, post the picture from their mission trip they went on 12 years ago. Like anyone can advertise that. And I think that's where what you talked about, going slow. Slow enough to evaluate over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think we often show people who we are instead of telling them.
Yeah.
And even Chris talked about there is 168 hours of the week. And it is so easy to show that 1 hour at church. But what is their life like the other 167?
Yeah.
Totally.
That's good.
Okay. Great question. How do you meet someone at church?
You shoot your shot. You gotta be bold, you gotta be brave, you gotta be confident, and you just go and introduce yourself and say, "Hey, I'm Laura. Can I sit with you?"
That's so cute. I love that.
I work with young adults.
Yeah.
And so I watch this happen really awkwardly a lot of the time.
Yes. Love it.
And I think there's some beauty in like I'm being direct and I'm like, hey, my name's Joel. I'd like to take you on a date or whatever,
Yeah.
But I think we don't need to rush to that. So I love what you're saying. Like, can I just be a human being who comes up and meets another human being, has no expectations of this relationship, but wants to sit by you at church, like wants to worship Jesus and get to know you, wants to invite you to the after party where we're all going to hang out in community and not be in a rush to isolate. Yeah.
And I don't think you can ask or shoot your shot at church without being involved in church. So if you don't have community at church, if you don't have mentors at church too, start there first. Get plugged in, go all in, make your church home your family.
Yeah.
And then you can just approach that differently. You can go to wise older people and say, hey, do you know about Bobby? What does Bobby's life look like? What is he doing those other 167 hours of the week? Is he somebody that is ready to be pursued? We can do our research a little bit. Okay, next question is, what can you do if you're already married to somebody who is not a flower at all? So you're in that covenant of marriage and you're sitting in service and you're hearing this acronym and you're seeing, ooh, that is not my spouse. So what advice do we have for people dating in the after season?
I think the first thing is resist the urge to assume that means I should be somewhere else.
Ooh,
I
that's
think
good.
God has you where he has you with the person he has you with. And that can be so hard. Like, we don't want to downplay the pain that can be in that relationship where someone is chasing after Jesus and the other spouse may not be. But I think we're called to be there. I think we're called to pray for that spouse. I think we're called to, like, leaders go first. Like, if you want your spouse, your husband, your wife to be someone who goes to church, is involved in Christian community, dives into God's word, are you demonstrating that? And are you inviting them into it? It will probably be slow and it will probably be painful, but we have a big God who can redeem those things. We need to fight for it, I think, is what I would say.
Yeah. Having that conversation is important. And I was just thinking about that yesterday too, like how many married couples are going to sit down with their spouse and kind of break this FLOWER acronym down and really pursue conversation to be like, how can we, the O in the acronym is be open in humility to growth. And how can we grow to be better for each other? And how can we grow to just chase after Jesus and build up the kingdom together?
Yeah, that's
good.
so good. And I think even just like breaking down what is marriage. Marriage is spending 24/7, 365 days a year with somebody. And we have so much influence like in our marriages. Like, I've been married for almost 7 years now, and the areas where I see from that close proximity with my husband, the areas where I see like I would love for you to grow in this area or stuff, like you were saying, Joel, like I can set that example too. I can lead. Like, we have so much more influence in our marriages than we think we do. And so really modeling like Jesus modeled too, like Jesus came to serve, not be served. That changes everything. Like walking in the opposite, kind of like what Chris talked about with his son at the baseball game too. Like walking and modeling the opposite of what our flesh like inclines us to do is huge. So don't give up.
And we love to, in marriage, I think, realize like we're celebrating, we have the ceremony and the reception, and we're one flesh under God. And then as soon as there is a disconnect and something we don't like, we like to be like, well, you need to fix this. It's like, no, we are one flesh fixing this together. So the invitation into, let's fight against our flesh. Let's fight against what the world is asking us to do together. I think that's really important. Not a you need to get it together mindset. So,
and just like how there's the discussion of like in dating going off on your own island and isolating, like that does not happen in marriages too. Like involve your church, your community, seek help. Like if you find yourself in a place too where you and your spouse don't have like healthy biblical community, like reach out. Text connect to 21999 or care, whatever word you need. Or marriage, and don't do it alone. That's what definitely would want to camp on for that. Don't do it alone. So well, thank you guys so much for episode 2 of the Dating Debrief. We'll see you guys again next week.
See ya.